Good morning, football fans. Chris here with DFSR, Jagerbombs Fantasy Sports, Fanshare Sports. We just joined me and Dane. If any of you haven't heard, me and Dane have taken over a little bit of a role, starting with PGA for Fanshare Sports, doing some ownership projection stuff that might work into some NFL content as well. This show is brought to you by both DFSR and Fanshare Sports. This is actually week one for me. I've been helping out with some harvest stuff here in local Saskatchewan. That is wrapped up. So now this is my actually first week where I get to sit in front of the 5 different screens and watch football all day long. So I am super excited. I hope you guys are excited too. Back with the live shows as well. We had NASCAR last night. It was a night race at Bristol, the first elimination race. We will be back with some NASCAR live shows starting next week as well. So stay tuned for that. But we're going to be working on an NFL live show every Sunday morning, game day show. This is kind of a feeler to see what everyone wants. So if there's aspects of the show that you like, that you don't like, please let me know either in the chat, in our Discord channel, wherever, and we will fine tune this show as the season goes along and give you the content that you guys want to see. So today we're going to talk about a bunch of things. We're going to talk about some injury news. We're going to talk about cash game plays, GPP plays, top bets. I've got a free roll for everyone. I'm going to let a few more people cycle in. I'm going to share a free roll with you. So there is a lot going on. If you want to get more of our content, what you see here on the screen, this is my cheat sheet. We're going to be going over it as well. If you want more of our content, maybe access to the full sheet, like on the sheet, we have rankings at each and every position. We talk about our top defenses, top stacks, what format we like to use them in. We also highlight our plays throughout all of the tabs. Members only will see that as well. If you want access to that sheet, I'm dropping a link here in the chat. You can jump in there, patreon.com/Jagerbombs. For $10 a month, it's going to get you access to our NFL content. That we also cover the main slate. We also do showdown content for Thursday Night Football, Sunday Night Football, and Monday Night Football as well. Full rankings for those three. We also have our Discord chats. You can jump in there. Like I said, $10 a month for the NFL. If you want to play, or if you play more than one sport, $20 a month will get you, and this is American dollars, $20 a month will get you all of our sports. We've got 4 coaches, NHL coming up. We've got college sports. We've got NBA. Pretty much any sport that's out there. We cover, like I said, multiple coaches out there to help you with each and every one of those individual sports. So $20 a month gets you access to those. And that right now, I think we're sitting at 11 sports, 10, 11 sports, something like that. So it's a really good value to get in and get all of our cheat sheets, all of our analysis, all of our coaches, one-on-one coaching, that sort of stuff, Discord channel. There are some free channels in our Discord. So if you're just looking to try us out, get a feel for, the people that are involved, the coaches, maybe see some winning picks. We have some channels that are open. I'm going to drop a link for that as well. You can join us for free. I'd like to drop this stuff in. So the second link that's coming up here, this is our Discord free trial. It doesn't expire, so you can jump in. You can stay a free trial member forever. You can join for, like I said, $10 a month or $20 a month at any time. Some channels that we do have open in our Discord. We have the Jager Sportsbook, so that's our betting picks, betting discussions, that sort of thing, winning picks. So you can see how our members are doing, how our coaches are doing. Right now, we've got baseball, which is free, our free content for our members in Discord throughout the month of September as we go into playoff season. We've got an all members chat, which is where we can discuss things. So make sure to get in there, check it out, paying or non-paying. With that, let's get things underway here. We got a big week 2 slate. We finally got some information after week 1. We're not going to take it all to the bank. Everything that we see isn't exactly going to carry over, but we do have a lot of injury news that we need to go over. First of all, one of the big ones I just seen pop up here, Alvin Kamara is going to be out for New Orleans. He was limited throughout the week, and they are ruling him out. That game it feels like an under for me, so that game is pretty much a stay away, at least for cash games. Anything's available, anything's viable, for GPPs, but for cash games, that's definitely a game that I'm going to stay away from. Tampa Bay has a lot of injuries there as well. Chris Godwin is out. Evans, Julio. Evans is expected to play. Julio is kind of still on the fence whether he's going to play or not. Russell Gage, might be their 4th receiver, 3rd now that Godwin's out. He's questionable as well. So for me, that game is just pretty much a stay away for cash. We can definitely look at it for GPP. So I just want to show you a couple things on the sheet here before we get into the next injuries. So between all these tabs, QB, running back, wide receiver, and tight end, we do see these projections. These are the DFSR projections that we pull in, tweaked a little bit. So you're going to see that for DK and FanDuel there as well. You're going to see for members, you're going to see like highlights. Green are going to be my core plays. Blue are going to be my secondary / GPP only plays, and yellow for value. Full red here, like you see, it means a player is out. Pink means he's questionable. So keep that in mind if you are looking at the sheet and you see that. That kind of leads us into our next kind of big news here is Deandre Swift sustained an injury. He seems to be always hurt, but he's questionable going into this game. It sounds like he's going to give it a go and try and play this week. But there is a lot of talk from sources that he could see limited snaps. It's not 100% on that. It's just not something I'm going to trust in cash. I think what that does with that news, even if he's limited a little bit, I think Amon-Ra St. Brown is going to be a big part of that offense. He's also looking to tie some big names with 8 straight games with 8 or more receptions. So absolutely huge for him to start his career second year here. So keep an eye out for that. I think that's someone. We'll talk about this Washington-Detroit game here shortly. Some other injury news, and you can always go over to dfsr.com. I share this in chat, but I do an injury analysis article. It usually comes out Thursday night. I like to update it. I'm trying to bring it out on Friday afternoon, just simply because that's when we get our final, practice reports for the week. So some of the players I had up here, obviously a lot of these, the quarterbacks we already knew about going in. Dak Prescott is out. Cooper Rush will start today. Zach Wilson continues to be out. He looks like he's targeting week 4 to come back. Joe Flacco's going to start again. Just set up a lawn chair there back in the pocket because Joe Flacco does not move around. We'll talk about that in the Cleveland defense as well coming up. We just talked about Kamara. He's been ruled out. Deandre Swift limited. Leonard Fournette is going to play. That is another situation maybe in cash games if you do want to get a piece of that New Orleans-Tampa Bay game, which I'm not for cash. Leonard Fournette is one that I do like. I think he could see a heavy workload today with so many banged-up wide receivers in that game. He's a good pass catcher. I know it's not playoffs for playoff Lenny, but he can definitely be touchdown Lenny today. I could see double touchdowns for him, at least getting in the end zone once. He's going to get the opportunities for sure. J.K. Dobbins is practiced in full. It's the first time since 2020 where he's actually practiced back-to-back full practices, so that's good to see for Baltimore's run game. They do have some injuries on the offensive line. Both their left tackles, I believe, are questionable. I haven't seen news if they are going to be playing today or not. That's going to be a situation where I'm probably going to avoid Dobbins in cash games as well. Maybe something we want to look at in GPPs, especially if those left tackle and right tackle are back in today. Going over to San Francisco, Elijah Mitchell is going to be out for, looks like a couple of months here. So Jeff Wilson is actually pretty cheap on both sites. I think this is maybe a little bit of a buy low situation on him because I think that price is going to go up, especially even if he sees 50 to 80 yards in this game, or let's just say he sees 15 to 20 touches in this game. I think that's going to increase his price. At least on DraftKings, we're going to see him probably up in the 6K range next week. So that's maybe a situation we want to, I think he is definitely cash viable. We can't really look into, I think we have to throw out the Chicago-San Francisco game from week 1 just because of that weather. It really threw a wrench in things. So don't know what was good to see, at least from a quarterback perspective, is Trey Lance. He rushed 14 times. I think even if we see that 9 to 10 range, I think that's a pretty high floor for him at his price. If you're looking at a cash game, a cheap quarterback for cash games, that's going to get you, a high floor in terms of those rushing attempts. I don't think he really needs to get you 300 passing yards for him to pay off. I think like 200 to 250 passing yards, 1 passing touchdown, and say 10 rushes for 40 or 50 yards. I think that's going to be enough at his price to be able to get you there. Najee Harris is going to play. We talked about the Tampa Bay wide receiver situation. Michael Pittman's been ruled out. T. Higgins is going to play for Cincinnati. This is a big bounce back spot for Cincinnati. They're kind of in a smash spot here against Dallas, who just doesn't look good at all. Rondale Moore is going to be out. Andy Isabella is going to be out. So Arizona's again back to Got AJ Green, Marquise Brown. Another punt play that I do like here, I think we can even include him in cash games, is Greg Dortch. When we look at his last week, what happened with him in the same situation, he caught 7 of 9 targets. So not only did he get targeted 9 times, he was very efficient and caught 7 of those for 63 yards. He only went from 3,000 to 3,500 on DraftKings. And we'll talk about Las Vegas on the other side of this match, but I think that's a good run back if you're looking at maybe like a Carr Adams core this week. So keep that in mind. Before we go any further here, I am going to pop up this free roll. Give me a second. I got to find it. Got about 18 tabs open here, so bear with me. Popping that in the chat right now. Free roll, got 50 entrants, so you can jump in that. Up to 50 people can get in. Is going to be via PayPal, $50 for first place, $25 for second place. So make sure to get in that. I'm going to try and run this weekly. If we continue to fill it up with the 50 people, I am probably going to increase the prizes. So keep that in mind. You can go on Twitter, share the content, go in Discord, share it with everyone else. Make sure everyone gets in and fills that up, because I will start increasing if I start seeing that thing fill up. So thank you very much for the support. I appreciate it, and good luck today in the free roll. Okay, so moving on a little bit, we had a few more injuries I wanted to go over. George Kittle, I believe, I just want to go double check on this, but I believe he's going to be out. Yes, not expected to play. Not officially out because we haven't seen the inactives or anything yet, but officially out. I think that's a boost to Deebo Samuel, who's really coming back. He wasn't 100%, I don't think, last week, so I think he's maybe a little bit closer to that this week. Again, that helps and hurts. Now, this may sound contrarian, but it does help and hurt Jeff Wilson, because George Kittle is an elite run blocker. I think Wilson's is cheap enough and is going to see enough volume where it's not going to completely matter, but for GPP upside, I think that does hurt Wilson a little bit. What also hurts Wilson is the fact that Deebo, even Ayuk, is getting some rushing attempts, so keep that in mind there. So that kind of covers the injuries. So I'm going to go over to the sheet now. We're going to talk about some quarterbacks, a couple of my favorites here. First, going to talk some cash game stuff. My number one cash game quarterback today is Derek Carr. What is he here? He is the 7th most expensive quarterback on DraftKings at 6,200. Really good matchup against an Arizona secondary that's just overall weak. They were last in fantasy points to quarterbacks in week 1, and he's got an elite target in Davante Adams. I will get the correct link. I'm just looking at it now. Looks like it. Just give me a second here. I'll go over these cash game plays. So we got Derek Carr. Even on FanDuel, 7,300 is an awesome price for him. Very cheap to be able to easily go in and get top wide receiver here in Davante Adams to pair with him, who saw 17 targets last week, which was a 48% target share in the offense. I was kind of unsure what was going to go on with him going into the season, but definitely looks very good for that combination going forward in terms of elite volume. So I think that's a great place to go. It's a great matchup. I think Carr is going to be throwing again 30, 35, even upwards of 40 times this game. I'm going to talk about some contrarian plays in that game if you maybe want to avoid this situation. There's definitely some places to go. Yeah, let me find that. That is just a free roll. Oh, okay, there we go. Thanks, Dob, for pointing that out. I am just in an exclusive free roll, so get in that one too. That one was up on DraftKings this week. There's some pretty good prizes in that. But as for my own, here it is there. There is the free roll link. Okay, so moving on to cash game plays. Second up for me in terms of cash games for quarterbacks, I really like Russell Wilson. I don't even want to call it a bounce back spot. He threw for 300 plus yards. The issue early on was that he just wasn't really targeting Judy or Sutton. I think the first 3 targets all went to Andrew Beck. What the hell? But once he learned that he's got some pretty good receivers, he looked actually pretty good. They kind of screwed up the game there. So I think maybe what you can do, there's a couple of ways you can go about Denver if you want to go cash games and get some exposures. You can go Russell Wilson. I like going Jerry Jeudy. I talked about it in my GPP article, but I also for cash games, I think you can go Sutton or Jeudy. I think that's fine. Judy's a little bit cheaper. He also gets the best matchup. in the slot against the Houston slot corner. I can't think of his name right now. I have to go check my article. Russell's also cheap on FanDuel here. So I think you can go that route with the passing game. You can also throw in Albert O. He's very cheap at tight end. He's going to be popular again here this week. He is down here 3,751 on FanDuel. I think that's very cheap. He got 6 targets in the offense last week, caught 5 of them. So that's a really good catch rate. Only got 33 yards, but again, he's cheap. He also got a target in the red zone. Another direction that I think you can go here, even in cash games, is pairing Russell Wilson. You can go with Albert O because he's cheap, but Javonte Williams is too cheap here at 6,500 in my opinion. He got 12 targets in the passing game last week. I know he splits some carries with Melvin Gordon, but eventually they're going to learn that Melvin Gordon is kind of getting old and washed up and just does not have anywhere near the upside of Javonte Williams. So I'm okay even with, I don't think that 12-7 carry ratio is going to continue. I think it's going to be more, in the 10-10 range, even trending towards Javonte Williams. But if Williams is going to be getting the heavy target share in the offense against Houston here, Russell likes to dump the ball off. Clearly, we've seen that even with like Chris Carson and some of the other Seattle running backs back in the day, that he would even throw to Carson, who wasn't the greatest pass catching back, but he'd still like his dump offs there. So I can see that. I prefer going the passing game in cash games. If you're going with Russell Wilson, if you're not going with Russell Wilson at quarterback, I do like getting Javonte Williams in as a running back today. So those would be my top 2 quarterbacks at the top, in terms of cash games. Not far behind Carson Wentz. There's just a little risk because Carson Wentz is still Carson Wentz. And while he throws a lot, he also likes to throw the game away, which in turn also helps him throw more. So there's always seems to be a lot of throwing with Wentz. But he's got probably his best targets, I would say, of his career. No offense to the Philly wide receivers. But you got Terry McLaurin. You've got Curtis Samuel, who's kind of breaking out here. He's kind of a gadget. I'd say the gadget wide receiver where they're throwing screens and stuff like that. He's really good at the yak yards type thing. And then you got the rookie in Dotson, who's still very cheap as well. So you got 3 targets there. Then you got the tight end in Logan Thomas, who I really like a lot. He's very cheap. It's probably where I'm going at tight end. So those 3 quarterbacks are I don't want to say spend down. I guess we're talking spend down in terms of FanDuel because Wilson's only 7,500, but Carr and Wentz are both cheap on DraftKings, and they'll allow you a lot of room because there is running backs, wide receivers that we're going to want to pay up for this week. Going into the running back position, I guess for quarterbacks, some other ones that I like for GPPs, I think Lamar Jackson gave us a lot of rushing upside there. So I'm going to be looking at him a little bit for some exposure in GPPs. Like I mentioned, Trey Lance, I think he gives you a high floor. I'm not going there for cash. I just like Wentz, Carr, Wilson a lot better. I think there's still some risk there. I heard there was, I forget what the time frame was. I heard this on a podcast yesterday. There was only 2 times where the 49ers had scored. It was like under so many yards in like the last 4 or 5 years. And both times were Trey Lance started. So I think we need to see more from Lance now that we maybe get some good weather. There is a possibility of rain today, but nothing like we've seen last week. So I really need to see it before I ever trust that. And with Carson Wentz, knowing that Carson Wentz is going to throw 40 times, has 4 good targets in the offense versus a bad Detroit defense, I don't think the $100 savings is not enough for me to go Trey Lance. But for GPPs, I think you can get in there if you want to get all the rushing with. I think a good stack for if you want to go with the San Francisco route, because I don't think Seattle's as good as Denver made them out to be. Like I said, Wilson wasn't really targeting those wide receivers early on. I think you can go Trey Lance with Jeff Wilson and then get Deebo Samuel in there. Or if you want to, spend down a little bit, you go Ayuk and kind of get those 3 in there. I think that that's a nice cheap stack with San Francisco. I think you can run that back with, DK Metcalf if you want. And maybe go that route because they are going to throw. If San Francisco is going to be winning this game, you're going to see Geno Smith throwing lots again. So either Lockett or DK Metcalf. I think that's going to be a lower owned GPP stack today. Another GPP route, to just go contrarian on the other side of this Baltimore-Miami game, I think you can go Tua. Very risky, obviously, because, the volume isn't completely there. Only 33 passes last week. He doesn't really run a whole lot. But he's got 2 really dynamic wide receivers in Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill. So I think you could even go with Tua and Tyreek Hill or Tua and Waddle maybe even both if you wanted, and then maybe run it back with a Baltimore wide receiver. Depending on how you think the game script's going to go. It's a pretty close spread here. In terms of betting, which I'll get into near the end of the show, I do like Miami in the spread today, the +3.5. I think they keep it close. So maybe you want to go Bateman and run it back that way. I think that's going to be a very low owned stack. Even if you don't even want to go to the quarterbacks in that game, you could go the Miami wide receivers or just one of the two of the wide receivers, run that back with Bateman there as well. So that kind of covers my quarterbacks that I like today. Jumping into the running back position, obviously at the top, we've got Jonathan Taylor with the news that Pittman's going to be out. I think Taylor's going to get he got 31 rushes last week, 6 inside the 10-yard line or inside the 20-yard line. Only 1 inside the 5, but again, he's getting all the work in the backfield pretty much. We may see some Nyheim Hines maybe splitting out into a slot role, but I'm not really interested in that. I think Jonathan Taylor's where you want to go. If you're going Indy here today, you can run that back with Jacksonville. Looking at some wide receivers for Jacksonville, you got Christian Kirk, who saw 12 targets last week, so he's going to get a heavy target share. So he's a good run back in a game script where you think Indy is kind of ahead most of the game. Jonathan Taylor's getting, again, 25 to 30 touches in the offense, and he's getting maybe 150 yards and a couple touchdowns. That means Jacksonville's going to have to throw. Favorite target for them is going to be Christian Kirk. So I think Taylor and Kirk make a lot of sense, even in cash games, if you want to go that way. I'm not really interested in Zay Jones or Marvin Jones, so it's pretty much Christian Kirk or bust for me for them. And then also coming down, it's going to be tough here because I think I see the chalk kind of going, and we're going to look at some FanShare Sports stuff here. Let me just jump into the running back position. I'm going to go position by position. And if you're new to FanShare Sports, what they do is they kind of go through all the content on the interwebs, whether that be Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, articles, videos, podcasts, and they collect all of that data. They put it together into a tag count, which you're going to see here. And that's just how many times a player is mentioned. They also look at the sentiment of those players, which you can slide over and look at the sentiment rating. So that's whether those tags are good, or if that maybe those tags mean that the person that wrote the article, whatever, are fading that player. Gives you that sentiment rating. But then we give you ownership projections here as well. A whole bunch of other information that I'll go over in some other videos. But, in terms of the chalk today, we've got Darrell Henderson. We've got Saquon Barkley, Jonathan Taylor, Joe Mixon, love a lot, James Conner, Antonio Gibson. So who don't we see here? Christian McCaffrey. So if you want to be contrarian here, and I'm not using Christian McCaffrey in cash games, but if Barkley's going to be high owned, and he looked absolutely dynamic, he looked like 2019 Saquon Barkley here. So you got Taylor, Barkley, and Mixon are going to be 3 of the top 5 owned running backs today. There's definitely some places we can pivot in GPPs, and Christian McCaffrey is one. It's a very close spread. He only got 10 rushes last week. What did he get? Only 5 targets. So it was people are a little bit down on him because I think he was a little bit higher owned last week. So that could be a spot. Maybe you want to pivot and be a little bit contrarian in that game. That's a good spot for leverage in that game alone. Say Carolina shuts down Barkley, and McCaffrey gets up into his regular 20 to 25 touches here and gets in the end zone, 100 plus yards and in the end zone at, say, 5 to 10% ownership. That's a good place to pivot for GPPs. Another running back, all the chalk guys I definitely love. I think you can make a case for loading up on all 3 of those, Barkley, Mixon, Taylor. One of the chalk guys that I'm probably going to be lower owned on than the field is going to be Darrell Henderson. I don't know if I completely trust that they're going to give Darrell Henderson the bulk of all the running back stuff in the backfield for the Rams. Cam Akers, I think, is a more talented running back still. He did come back from injury. Now, the difference between J.K. Dobbins and Cam Akers here for me, because it was very similar. They both went down with injury last year. Akers came back and he played in the playoffs, and they weren't afraid to give him the ball. So that's one thing that I definitely looked at here in terms of if you're going to fade the chalk, which you don't have to completely fade it. I'm not going to be as high owned on Henderson. I do have some exposure to Henderson. Just, I love the matchup. They're 10-point favorites. I just don't 100% believe that Henderson is going to be the lead back all season. I could be wrong. But if he's going to be, the highest owned running back today, that's a spot I definitely will pivot off of. Now, a couple spots that I like pivoting in that range, if you're looking at GPPs here and you're looking to get some leverage off Darrell Henderson, say he only gets 10 carries today maybe 1 or 2 targets, and really disappoints with only 40 or 50 yards, doesn't get in the end zone, it's going to be a good spot to pivot from. Now, that brings us back to the Las Vegas game. We know Carr and Adams are going to be probably the most popular stack this week. Cash games, GPPs, pretty much all around. Carr's nice and cheap, helps you get those 17 targets. I don't think Adams is going to get 17 targets again, but he's double digits for sure, probably in the 12 to 15 range. Need some of that Guru energy drink. But if you want to pivot in that game, maybe get some leverage off those Las Vegas chalk, go to Josh Jacobs. Say Las Vegas gets up early on Arizona. It's a 5.5 point spread, very high total. So this isn't a crazy by any means, but Jacobs is going to be low owned because of people are either going Darrell Henderson and probably pairing Darrell Henderson with Carr and Adams. So if you want to leverage your lineup a little bit in GPPs, you don't have to do it a whole lot. You could go Josh Jacobs, say he gets up in that 80 to 100 yards, 15 plus touches, gets in the end zone a couple times, while Devontae Adams doesn't get in the end zone and has just, a pedestrian for him, say 80 to 90 yards for him and no touchdowns at his, ownership, and Jacobs gets in the end zone twice and gets in that 80 to 100 yards at like a third the ownership. I think that's a good leverage play right there. It leverages you off of the Las Vegas chalk as well as leverages you off of the Darrell Henderson chalk. So it's kind of like a double leverage play there with Josh Jacobs. I really like going that way. That's probably my favorite in that range. You can pay up a little bit more. I still like Antonio Gibson. I think we need to get on Antonio Gibson because it looks like Brian Robinson, he looked amazing in his practices doing his drills and stuff. I mean, that's just videos. That's not in pads against other players, but he's going to be back soon, even as soon as next week. So if you're on Antonio Gibson in season long, you may want to try and trade him right now, today, this morning, get something out of him, because if Brian Robinson comes back, looks good, you're not going to get much for Antonio Gibson going forward. Now, if Antonio Gibson has a really huge game, we may get to sneak another game in with him, because they're not obviously going to get Robinson isn't going to be back until he's 100%, and then know that. Yeah, Kamara is definitely out. That's going to be a fade for me in that backfield, because Mark Ingram's the backup, and he was questionable all week. He's expected to play, but I mean, what are we really going to get out of Mark Ingram? Thanks for tuning in, DST. I also see Casey in there, Mike, Louie, Dobb, 33JB. Thank you all for showing up. I appreciate it. Louie's got a question here. I will jump to the questions. So we've got Jamar Chase and Jeff Wilson Jr. or Tyreek and Henderson, DK Cash. So for cash games, I'm probably going to lean to the first one with Chase and Wilson. Tyreek's got a lot of upside. I like the second one. Henderson's going to be chalk too, but again, that's a chalk piece I don't mind fading today. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. Because when in terms of chalk, like I talked about, you got Taylor, Barkley, and Mixon. Those three I don't really like fading. They're all in good spots. They're all favorites here. I really, really like Mixon. But like I talked about, there's still some question marks with Henderson getting that elite volume that we've seen last week. And we know that people are going to be chasing what they saw last week. So I'm definitely in on that. Yeah, in terms of the passing game for New Orleans, it's a tough matchup. I kind of see. Welcome, John. Thanks for tuning in. I'll answer your question in just a second here. I'm going to talk about this New Orleans passing game. Mike Thomas, I think, is going to see the targets. I think that's the place where you probably want to turn to the most. I think we can still chase Chris Olave. He's a deep play threat. I think he's going to be still low owned because he didn't really break through last week. So I think we know Jameis Winston likes to put the ball down the field. So definitely a GPP spot, not touching anything for cash. Thomas is close for cash, but there's just other wide receiver spots that I like better. But for GPPs, that is definitely a spot I would go. Now, John asks Chris Doolin or Dortch. So Chris Doolin's probably going to be, or Paris Campbell are going to be the two guys for Indy that are going to get a little bit of the targets in replacement of Michael Pittman. Very close for me between those two. We seen Dortch last week. I mean, let's look at Doolin here. I think he got 6 targets last week as well. Yeah, 6 targets, and Michael Pittman was in the game. So I think both are very viable. 3,200. What did I say Dortch was? Was he up to 32 as well? So 35. So he's just a little bit more. 9 targets. Jeez, that's a tough one. If you only play one cash lineup, I would... Depends if you need those extra 300. It's obviously Doolin. Let's just go look at the matchups here real quick. I'm going to jump over to that and see Jacksonville. Yeah, they were giving up a lot of points to wide receivers last week, and then we got Dortch. Let's get him showing up here versus Vegas. I think Vegas actually has a little bit better of a defense than Jacksonville, so I probably lean Doolin to get a little bit of savings and a little bit better of a matchup. I also think maybe Indy throws it a little bit more. I think maybe Doolin gets a few more opportunities here, so it gives you a little bit higher floor, a little bit higher upside. So I think I would go Doolin. Cordero thoughts. I don't think we see the volume that we saw last week with Cordero whatsoever. He's going to be low owned, I think. We've got a pretty good projection on him here. So in terms of points per dollar, I just think the Rams are a lot better than they showed last week. It could be a big bounce back blowout spot for the Rams. So I really don't think he's going to get 22 carries here. I mean, the backup running back is out again. I think that's, I want to say Jamal Williams. I'm going to go down here and just check that out here. Damien Williams, my bad. Tyler Algier didn't really get involved. So I don't think they're going to run the ball as much as they did last week for Atlanta. So I'm a little bit down on Cordero. I could see it. He's going to be low owned GPP. I think you could take a shot on him for sure and just hope that the Rams are still kind of sleepy at the wheel. I'm not sure really about Zeke. Yeah, he's going to be low owned for sure. Like I said, there's going to be a lot of concentration on Taylor, Barkley, Mixon, and Daryl Henderson, like your top four there that we're looking at here. James Conner kind of pops in as a high owned. He's got some tags here this week. He's got an ownership projection in the range of, let me find the ownership projection here, 8%. This is not too high. Rex Burkhead's he's value running backs. There really isn't a whole lot this week to go off of. Like we've got Rex Burkhead, who I do trust. That was one spot I pat myself on the back, crushed last week. I just don't trust Pierce at all. Now that also leads us into a GPP leverage play with him, where I think what we could do is people are going to be on Rex Burkhead a little bit more here. Looks like he's going to be a top 10 owned running back after what he did last week. I think Houston's going to have to throw. So I think he's still involved. So I'm still in on Rex Burkhead. But if you really want to go off the wall, Pierce really screwed over a lot of people at higher ownership last week. I think you could maybe go that route. But again, it's a tough spot here against Denver for him to even get the volume. Now back to Zeke. I don't think this is I think this is a Cincinnati smash spot. Like I said, I do like Cincinnati on the spread here to cover by more than a touchdown. Just think Burrow bounces back, and the fact that T. Higgins is playing, he's going to have all his wide receivers mixing in there. I think this is going to be a smash spot versus Dallas. So I don't think Zeke's I think that lowers his floor. I think that lowers his upside. We know what Tony Pollard can do. He maybe didn't do a whole bunch in week one, but we've seen it last year. I think there's just too much split and too many question marks between those two. I'm off of the Dallas backfield whatsoever. I would choose Zeke over Pollard if you had to. I would definitely, in this range, I like Cordell Patterson better than Zeke. I talked about Josh Jacobs. I like him a lot better as a double leverage spot. Henderson, obviously, going up to Najee Harris even a little bit, but Antonio Gibson, Javonte Williams, he's going to be very low owned, I think, but I'm off of it for sure. All right. The Giants' terrible passing game. What about playing Barkley and CMC in the same lineup? Yeah, that's not going to be a popular running back combination, I don't think. It's one way to, and I think it gives you leverage all the way around because I think a lot of people are going to be paying up for one running back, paying down for another, like Henderson and Taylor, Henderson and Barkley, Henderson and Mixon. I think that's maybe a route they're going to go, even if they're paying up. McCaffrey's not going to be one of the two they're going to be paying up for. So I think that gives you some leverage there as well. I don't like it in cash, but for GPP, I think that's totally viable. Mike Evans or T. Higgins, PPR. I think you got to go Mike Evans if we're talking season long here. Mike Evans, to me, is the better wide receiver. It's, again, Brady has really struggled against New Orleans. It's like his kryptonite here. But if all those other guys are questionable, Mike Evans seems to be the most healthy out of that receiving group. So I would choose Evans over Higgins there. OJ Howard? Nope, I don't want any OJ Howard. I don't believe in that. He had 2 targets and both went for touchdowns. If you think he's going to get a touchdown on every target, sure, load up on him. I don't think that's going to be the case. I want volume out of my tight ends, and there is multiple tight ends. I'm going to get into tight ends here shortly. There's multiple tight ends that get a heck of a lot more volume. And in terms of regression, that is one spot that's going to regress. Touchdowns are so variant. It's like defense. Defense points is so variant. And so that's another spot I'd like to talk about. I'm going to jump into that right now because I've had it on my list to talk about and make sure that I talked about. We all know who the chalk defense is today. It's going to be Cincinnati. They're super cheap. Dallas allowed 4 sacks last week. Their O-line didn't look great. Cincinnati's D-line didn't look that great either. I think they only got 1 sack last week, going up against Cooper Rush, 2,200. They're going to be 40% owned in cash games. This is a spot. Defense is with so much variance in defensive points. Cincinnati could go out there, and hold Dallas to 10 points, and we could see a defense, if they don't get sacks and picks, it's not worth it. This is a spot I don't like running chalk defenses simply because there's so much leverage. There's more leverage in defense, I think, than any other position. If you listen to Pat Mayo as well, him and his DraftKings guys talk about it a lot as well. So definitely check that out. But I think we can even go Atlanta down here. We know the Rams are going to throw a lot. They're only 2,100. All you really need is a pick six, a score, a couple of sacks. A defense can give up 30 points and get some sacks, some turnovers, and you're going to have more points than a defense that allows 10 points and gets maybe 1 sack, no turnovers. So that is why I like leveraging those defenses. Don't get me wrong. Bengals are going to be super popular. I think a lot of people are going to put them in cash, but if you want just a little bit of leverage down here, especially, I think Atlanta makes some sense at min price, and it's going to get you, you're going to go from 40% to like 5% on your defense. Even if they get the same amount of points, you're winning with Atlanta because your lineup is now a little bit separated from everyone else. So that's just kind of my thoughts. Jets D, I am not interested in the Jets D whatsoever. I think they're going to get ran all over on. Now, the problem, what I'm looking for when I'm targeting my defense is I want to go against a team that's going to throw a lot. I want to get those turnovers. I think this is a low-scoring game in Jets and Cleveland, but we know Cleveland loves running the ball. It's the lowest total on the slate. With Cleveland running the ball with Hunt and Chubb, say 40 times, there's not a lot of opportunities for sacks, for one. There's not a lot of opportunities for turnovers because they don't fumble. And there's not a lot of, with the turnover thing, interceptions. You're not going to get a lot of interceptions because they're only throwing the ball 20 times, 25 times. So it really lowers your floor, really lowers your upside on that Jets defense. I'd rather go with a team, like I said, Atlanta, because the Rams are going to throw a lot more. Who else do we got here? Houston, possibly. If you don't believe in Russell Wilson, Wilson's going to throw it quite a bit. I mean, they do have those running backs, but he's going to throw it a little bit more. Cincinnati, the only reason I'm off of Cincinnati a whole bunch is because of how high owned they're going to be. Looking at some other defenses here, one that I do like, I think Miami, the problem with Miami is Baltimore's going to run a lot. That kind of limits. Detroit versus Washington, I think, can make some sense because, like we talked about earlier, Carson Wentz is Carson Wentz. While he may throw for 300 yards and 3 or 4 touchdowns, he may throw 2 or 3 interceptions, fumble the ball, and you get those turnovers. That is another situation where Detroit could lose the game. They could give up 30 points and get, 2 turnovers, maybe a touchdown and 4 or 5 sacks and easily be, one of the top 5 defenses in terms of points per dollar on the slate. New England versus Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh does throw a little bit, but I do see them, running it a lot now that Najee Harris is healthy. So I don't see that. Again, you're going up against a quarterback that can turn the ball over. So I think they're going to be a little bit lower owned because I think if people are paying up, I do like Cleveland versus the Jets because, one, you're against Joe Flacco, who's just going to stand there and throw the ball in the backfield. He could, throw easily 2 to 3 interceptions, a fumble possibly in there, not score a lot of points for the Jets possibly. And Cleveland defense with Chubb is a nice correlation. It's one of my top correlation stacks. Hey, Chad, how's it going, buddy? Yeah, definitely Skol Vikings on Monday Night Football. I'm scared as shit. I'm super excited after week 1 watching them beat the Packers, but now Kirk Cousins has to play on a Monday Night Football game. He's like, 0-8 to start his career on Monday Night Football games? I mean, this is a new coach, which thank God we have a new coach, right? I'm not going to get big into Monday Night Football, but definitely Skol Vikings. Thanks for tuning in, Chad. And yes, smash that like button, everybody. I really, truly appreciate it. Now, repeat the top defenses. Okay. Ownership wise, Cincinnati's going to be the top defense. Makes a lot of sense. They get a great matchup versus Dallas. Like I said, they're 2,200 on DraftKings. So definitely they're going to be the top owned defense, probably in the 40% range. The only reason I'm off of them personally is because of that ownership. I think it's the most variance position in fantasy sports. So if I can get a defense at a quarter or more of the ownership, with the same floor, same upside, I'm definitely going to go there because it doesn't take a whole lot for Atlanta to outscore Cincinnati's defense. Or so one thing that I do, like I'm going to repeat again, the defenses when I'm targeting them, I'm not targeting teams that are not going to score a lot of points. I'm targeting against teams that are going to throw a lot, because when the teams throw a lot, I don't care if they score 30 points against my defense, but if they're throwing 30, 40 times, in a close game or something like that, I want the opportunities for turnovers. I want the opportunities for sacks. So as we get more data in here going into the season, I'm going to be looking at one thing that I look at big time to start things off is blitz percentage for the team, how many sacks they get off those blitzes, and just sacks in general, the other team's offensive line and that defense's defensive line. And I'm looking for that differential, like Carolina here versus the Giants. Now, these are last year's numbers, but Carolina say they were 7th best D line in terms of pass rush, while the Giants were 31st in terms of pass protection. That is a huge differential. That is a place that I would target. So that data is going to be updated going into week 3. I usually like to get 2 weeks of data before I update the D-line, O-line stuff, especially in terms of health. There's some teams out there. So Cincinnati would be number 1 just because they're cheap. They're going up against Dallas. Like it's, Cooper Rush, backup quarterback. Atlanta is the team that I'm going to pivot from Cincinnati from. I think they're going to be, if we're looking at 40% ownership for Cincy, I could see 5% or less for Atlanta. I also like coming up, like I talk about Detroit. While I said I like Carson Wentz and stuff, I also like Detroit defense because while Carson Wentz, he did it last week, he was good for fantasy against Jacksonville. 313 yards, 4 touchdowns. We also threw 2 interceptions. So if we go look at Jacksonville's defense, where are they here? They put up 6 points. I mean, they were super cheap. They were only 2,500, but you're getting that 6 points. I mean, for cash games, you take that. You could have played Jacksonville defense with Carson Wentz in cash games, and you would have got there on both in terms of points per dollar. So I'm totally fine with that. That's over 2x from your defense. I will take that. So my second favorite defense after, say, Atlanta. I mean, Cincinnati's up there. I've already talked about that. Atlanta is the pivot. Detroit's up there. I do like Cleveland. I think they're going to be lower owned. If you're paying up, that's the defense that I'm going to today, is Cleveland. I think they're going to keep the Jets low scoring. I think they're going to get some turnovers. Again, they play a bad quarterback who's probably going to throw 30 to 35 times. Chance for turnovers there, so I definitely like that. So that's kind of where I'm going in terms of defense. Now, wide receivers we haven't really looked at. Running backs I wanted to look at a little bit more. I want to go down there. Like I said, there isn't a whole lot of cheap running backs that I like today. It's probably going to bring Nyheim Hines. If I'm playing, I'm only doing about 15 GPP lineups. I'm just not going to have time. I'm running baseball projections here today as well for DFSR. So I got a lot going on. If I was going more than 20 lineups, I would definitely fit Nyheim Hines in there with the lack of pass catchers. We know he's a good pass catcher. They can roll him out in the slot. He could see 5 to 8 targets, kind of as a floor. I'm not into Michael Carter. He's got a pretty good projection here. Got some decent volume last week, but Jeff Wilson Jr. And then Rex Burkhead are really the only two that I'm looking at. I think Kenyon Drake, if J.K. Dobbins is announced that maybe he's not going to be 100%, he's going to maybe be on a pitch count type thing. I talked about for GPPs, you could maybe pivot off of Burkhead and go Damian Pierce. I am not doing that whatsoever. He only got 1 rush last week. It just doesn't look like they completely trust him yet. Other than that, there just isn't a whole lot of cheap running backs. So wide receiver, there's definitely a lot more value. Now, in terms of ownership, if you're paying up for these top guys, let's go over and just look at the wide receiver position on FanShare and just look at where we're at in terms of ownership, tags, popularity, and just see, obviously, Devontae Adams at the top, Cooper Kupp, Greg Dortch. So back to the Doolin versus Dortch thing. The biggest spot that I like to make my pivots for leverage, whether it be cash game leverage, whether it be GPP leverage, especially, is looking at the ownership. This is where I really utilize the fan share sports stuff. Well, if Greg Dortch is going to be the third highest owned running back or even top 5 in terms of ownership this week, I'm going to pivot to Austin Doolin. Just simply because you pretty much get the same kind of wide receiver in the same kind of situation. You've got the top wide receivers on each team down, and you're going to get Doolin at, say, if we're looking at 14-15% for Dortch, you're probably going to see 5 to 8%, half the ownership for Doolin. They got the same floor, the same upside. They both seen targets in week 1. They both have a little bit upside because of their price tag. Both offenses, I think, are going to throw probably in the 30 to 40 times range. So I think that's just awesome leverage right there. I do like Dortch. I will have some ownership of him. I was going to split the two of them pretty much. I think now I'm going to lean a little bit more, probably 60-40 in terms of Doolin, just because of that ownership gap. Curtis Samuel is going to be popular. Now, one thing I wrote up in my DFSR GPP article this week, I'm going to grab that here for you for those that missed it. Here we go. There is my GPP article for this week over at DFSR. One of my top GPP stacks is Wentz and Terry McLaurin. Why? Because Curtis Samuel and Dotson both had good weeks last week, while Terry McLaurin was very quiet. Well, in my opinion, Terry McLaurin is the best wide receiver on that team. He's going to be extremely low owned, with Samuel especially as the 4th most popular running back here. Looks like he's going to be about 10%. We're probably going to see Dotson in that same kind of area. I think we're going to get Terry McLaurin in like the probably, with how many other popular running backs are here up at the top. We've got Kupp, Adams are going to be popular. Deebo Samuel is going to be popular. Jamari Chase. All 4 of these top guys are going to be popular, which could create some leverage. Tyreek Hill in the top tier. Mike Evans could. I think he's going to be a little bit lower on just because of the matchup, and I think that game is possibly an under. McLaurin, Amon-Ra St. Brown makes a lot of sense as well, but Wentz and McLaurin are going to be Wentz maybe not super low on, but I think McLaurin is definitely going to be. This is kind of one of those leverage spots where I think the better wide receiver who had a bad week 1, while the value guys who are much, much cheaper had a really good week. It's a great matchup. It's not like we're targeting a good wide receiver off a bad week and a bad matchup. He actually gets a really good matchup, while his 2 other wide receivers, and one of them isn't even a starter. If you're looking at, the starting sets when they're out there with 2 wide receiver sets, Dotson is 3rd wide receiver in that offense. McLaurin going to be super cheap. I'm going to pivot there for sure and take some in GPPs and build around that. Now I'm going to run that back with Amon-Ra St. Brown for sure, especially if Swift isn't 100%, which it doesn't sound like he's going to get his high volume like we're normally seeing out of Swift. And if that's the case, I think they're going to throw quite a bit. And St. Brown is definitely the guy that I'm going to be running that back with. He's going to be a little bit higher owned as well. But how high owned? I don't think it's going to be super high owned this week like it was last week. 1, the price came up. 2, you've got concentration of ownership of these top 4 guys that are very expensive. Well, if guys are paying up for a top running back like we talked about and a top wide receiver, maybe a value quarterback like we talked about with Carr and Adams, say that's a popular stack, and then guys come over. I don't think St. Brown, because they're going to be going down the list here and looking at some other guys. You got Rashad Bateman, I think, is going to be a little bit popular. Jerry Jeudy and Cortland Sutton, I think, are in good spots here. We talked about Michael Thomas getting a concentration of targets with Alvin Kamara out. Christian Kirk had a really good week going back against Indy here, whose defense didn't really look that great. So we got a lot of mid-tier guys here. Hunter Renfro is going to be super cheap. That's another pivot spot. If you're looking to pivot off the Raider chalk, Renfro looked terrible. It's not even really that he looked terrible. It was just that Derek Carr had just like zoned in on Devontae Adams big time. Like, it was incredible. While I don't see that really changing, Renfro could start to get more involved as the offense really evolves, because it really is a brand new offense. The only thing that really changes is Devontae Adams, but Devontae Adams changes everything. And then Robbie Anderson had a good week in that Carolina Giants game. I think he could see some ownership this week. DJ Chark, another guy for Detroit who I would mix in with my Wentz and McLaurin stacks, or Samuel. I think you can kind of mix in those Washington guys, build a lot of different Washington stacks out of that. And it presents a really good game stack, because Detroit on the other side is going to have to throw a lot, especially again with Swift hurt. And you got Chark and you've got Amon-Ra St. Brown, there's a lot of opportunities to game stack. You could build 20 lineups just on game stacks of Detroit and Washington in that. So I think it's going to be possibly a popular game stacking spot. But again, I think Shark and McLaurin, if you wanted to go that route with Wentz, I think that's going to be one of the ways that you can get away from some ownership in that game stack. Bengals defense, a safe pick. Well, they're a safe pick in that they get a good matchup. They're super cheap. The only thing that I don't like about it, like I mentioned several times here, is just the ownership. I don't like playing 40% owned defenses just because you can get so much leverage off that being a very high variance position. Going down the board, there's Curtis Samuel. He's going to be popular. So in cash games, you're going to see Curtis Samuel probably in the 20 to 30% owned range, just because, like I said, you're going to see a lot of Carr and Adams, and then paying up for one of the running backs. You're going to have to go value somewhere, and Curtis Samuel is one of those spots. Now, a pivot off of him in the same range, Donovan Peoples-Jones. First of all, Cleveland runs a lot. Second of all, Curtis Samuel is going to be high owned. So he saw 11 targets in week 1, which was 36.7% target share in that Cleveland offense. I don't think he's going to see 11 targets again, but he looks like the most popular choice in terms of passing, pass catchers. So definitely going to go that way as well. Chase Claypool could be a little bit of a mix, but I'm not really interested a whole bunch there. Russell Gage, it's going to depend on his status when the news starts dropping here. So we're going to keep an eye on that, and I'm going to post. So if you're in our Discord, this is also free for all members. Make sure to go down to the hashtag NFL News channel, and you can pay attention to that. I've got Underdog NFL Twitter on there, and then we've also got a fantasy football news channel. A lot of good Twitter accounts to follow all in one spot there, just to kind of follow the news. Underdog NFL, I absolutely love, just simply because they feel everything. They pretty much concentrate on fantasy. They're not really looking at, the tackles, tight ends, any of the defensive players or anything like that. They're concentrated on the offensive guys. So here is some actives, inactives, some key ones right now. Active, Swift, Mike Evans, Leonard Fournette, Russell Gage, Kadarius Toney, Mark Ingram. Inactives, okay, here we go. Alvin Kamara, we already talked about. Julio Jones is out, so that's a boost to Mike Evans for sure. I think that's also a boost to Leonard Fournette. Russell Gage could get involved there. And then J.K. Dobbins is actually out. He practiced in full this week, but they're going to hold him out another week. I think that helps Lamar's rushing upside here a little bit. I also like Bateman a little bit. Now, I haven't got into tight ends yet, but I am going to go across and look at tight ends right now. Darren Waller is going to be popular. Las Vegas stacks again. Albert O, like I talked about, is probably going to be the most popular cheap tight end. I personally like Logan Thomas. He's my favorite value tight end this week. I'm definitely going to be on him. He saw 6 targets in week 1. Like we said, Wentz is going to throw a lot. He's got a lot of targets, but he does like the tight end. We've seen that over in Philly with when they ran Ertz and Goddard together. Both of them were viable tight ends even when they both played. So I definitely like that. I'm not touching Mike Davis with my worst enemies lineup this week. I was on him last week thinking that, we may see 2 years ago Mike Davis where he rushed a lot, but he just was a complete disappointment. It didn't help also that those tackles were out. Now I'm trying to find the news on those tackles. I think it's Stanley. He's going to be out for sure. The right tackle might be in, but I'm still not on him. I'm just more concentrated on Lamar Jackson. And if we're looking at getting off of Darren Waller here in the top tier, Mark Andrews is more expensive, like by quite a bit here, $800 on DraftKings. He's going to be low owned. I like Mark Andrews. He sees like almost the most target share in that whole entire offense. Bateman's up there as well, but Andrews is definitely Jackson's top pass catcher. So I think a Jackson and Andrews stack makes a lot of sense. And then you can run that back with Tyreek Hill or Jalen Waddle. You're getting a very high upside, low ownership, in my opinion, stack. Because again, we talked about the top wide receivers. Going to see a lot of concentration to Kupp, Adams, Debo, Chase. It's going to put some low ownership on Tyreek Hill. So you're getting some leverage with Tyreek Hill over the other top wide receivers. You're also getting some leverage off of Darren Waller. with Mark Andrews. You're also getting leverage off of the quarterback position, which Wilson, Carr, Wentz are going to be popular going up to Lamar Jackson. So I think that's going to be a low-owned leverage GPP that I'm going to be building some lineups here once we're done with the show. Now, Juwan Johnson, again, this is kind of a stay-away game. Our projections definitely like him from a points per dollar perspective. He's only 2,500. I think in cash games you could definitely go that way. I just don't see a lot of upside there. What did he get last week? He saw 5 targets, caught 2. That's nothing that excites me about GPP. He's going to have to get in the end zone, probably 50 yards and in the end zone. 6 points is getting you 2x, a little over 2x, 2.5x, something like that. I think you could see a line similar to what you saw last week with 5 to 8 DK points. I don't think that's going to win you a GPP, though. Cash games, I'm totally fine with it. But for GPPs, that doesn't really interest me. There's tight ends that have a lot more upside than that, because you're wanting 3 to 4x to win a GPP. Pat Friermuth, I think, is going to be a lower owned tight end this week. He sees some high target share in that offense. He's kind of Chase Claypool at the start of last year, like after Deontay Johnson, who again, that's going to be another GPP wide receiver that I do like, that sees high volume, also has a ton of talent and upside there. New England's defense isn't the New England defense of old, so they don't scare anyone anymore, really. So I like going there, but Claypool used to be like the second in line for targets in this offense. Friermuth has really come on. He's looked really good. He only caught 5 of 10, but he turned it into 75 yards. So he's not just catching the ball, within 2 to 5 yards of the line of scrimmage. He's actually getting his routes downfield. So there is definitely some 3 to 4x upside there with him at, again, low ownership, and that is kind of a pivot off of the Darren Waller chalk. Zach Ertz is healthy and in there. I think he makes sense with the lack of pass catchers in Arizona. He was shit last week. He kind of got you there if you played him with that touchdown, but you take that touchdown out and he was absolute garbage. I think he's going to be low owned with upside. We know he's got the talent for sure. TJ Hawkinson versus Washington. He's going to see some target share in there as well, but I prefer the other Detroit guys, Shark and Monroe St. Brown, more in that offense. So Hawkinson's kind of like outside my top 5 in terms of tight ends. Tyler Higbee could be popular in this game. He saw 11 targets, so he's seen a lot in that Rams. Now, the thing with the Rams, I don't think we're going to see Higbee in that 11 target range, probably in the 5 to 6 range this week. I think Allen Robinson, I don't want to say he shit the bed. He only got 2 targets last week. He made 1 really nice catch as well. Like, I don't know what happened there, why they just didn't target him. The Rams just seemed kind of out of sorts in the first week. I think they really get back to that. McVay really talked about wanting to get him involved more. So I could see that a lot of that Higbee target share start going towards Allen Robinson this week. So I'm not really on Higbee, especially if he's going to be a top 5 owned tight end this week. All right, so that kind of goes over all the positions here. In terms of, I'm just going to kind of put together a little bit of a core here for cash games that I do like. Adams, like I talked about, I'm just going to go down and it's just straight punt. Here for running backs, I really like going kind of mid-range. I'm not going Jonathan Taylor. It's just because of the money more than anything. I don't want to spend up with him and then have to play 3 punt values who are, a lot of high variance. I like going Mixon and Chubb, I guess you could call it. Tight end, I think you could go Friermuth at 44. For cash, though, I do like going down to Logan Thomas at 34. It gives you a little bit more to play with. We talked about Doolin, so I'm going to throw him in there at 3,200. That gives you a 6,100 average for your wide receiver and flex. If you wanted to pay up for your tight end, you definitely could. I personally like playing 3 running backs and not all, but if you're playing a running back in your flex, I like a pass catching running back. Another CMC, Chad, is actually, I talked about him early on. He's going to be low owned, but not for cash. I'm not playing him in cash games. He would be like more of a GPP leverage play off of, Taylor and some of the other top running backs. So I personally will have 0 CMC this week. If he burns me, so be it. I'm just going in other directions. I'm not really paying up that high for my running backs this week. Back to my lineup here. Flex. Just remember in your flex spot to always put your afternoon player in flex. Make sure that he's in the late games. just so that you have some movement for late swaps. If there's some news should break on anything, you got some ability. You can put in a tight end, wide receiver, or a running back into that spot. So that's kind of where I like going. You can definitely switch that around. Jeff Wilson's going to be popular. So let's take out Chubb, put him in. Now you've got a 7,100. You can go with another big wide receiver, or if you want to go Jonathan Taylor, 4,300 for a wide receiver left over. That's still very doable. Like Dotson's in there. That's really it down here that I like. AJ Green could see some. So paying up for Taylor is definitely viable with the punt plays that are in there. You could definitely throw Dortch in there as well. And if you did that kind of opens up where you can pay up for Taylor and Barkley, and you still got 5,800. So there's a lot of ways to go this week. This is just my favorite. Now, if you want to take a screenshot of this and if you want to follow this along, you definitely can. Got Wilson in there. Wilson. 7,100 average left over. So that's pretty solid. I don't even mind, like I had Chubb in there. Like you could go up to the Browns, pay up for defense. You don't have to punt defense there in cash games this week at all, especially if Cleveland's going to be lower owned, because a lot of people, if Cincinnati's going to be 40% owned, I'm not going there. Like I said, I'm not going to tell anyone not to go with Cincinnati defense because they are in a smash spot. But just with the variance in defense, I'm going to avoid that and kind of pivot off to some lower ownership, which gives me a little bit more upside. And I do like Cleveland's defense versus the Jets. You can fit Chubb in there. You still got 5,500. So there's a lot of different ways you can go there. That's what I like. Now, if you want to go over and try Fanshare Sports out, make sure to use promo code Jaeger, and you're going to get 20% off your weekly, monthly, or yearly subscription. Go and check that out. Dane and I have taken over, are working on taking over some of the PGA projections. Dane handled week 1 in terms of the ownership projections and the model and stuff like that. Did a bang up job. Absolutely awesome. We're going to have some shows coming up for PGA as well, like Wednesday night, Wednesday afternoon, something like that. Just talking about that ownership, some leverage spots that we can look at, projections and stuff like that for PGA. This show is going to turn into some more. I'm probably going to have a Fanshare Sports specific show, a little bit shorter, just looking at some GPP leverage spots for NFL on Sundays, just based off the ownership projections and stuff like that. So stay tuned for more shows like that for sure. If you want to get a copy of the cheat sheet, make sure I shared the link in chat. I will pop it up here one more time for you guys that are still sticking around here. And then I'm going to share the free roll once again, giving away $50 for first place, $25 for second via PayPal. And if it fills up, like I said, I'm going to consider upping the prizes, maybe getting some sports memorabilia to give away, working on some deals there as well. So stay tuned for that. Here is the NFL package, patreon.com/JagerBombs. $10 a month gets you the NFL package. $20 a month gets you access to all of our sports, cheat sheets, Discord, coaches, everything that we offer over at Jaeger Bombs Fantasy Sports. And one more time with the free roll. I will put free roll link this time so we can distinguish between the two. There's the free roll link as well, dropped in chat. Thank you all for showing up. This actually went an hour. I was expecting it to go about a half an hour, but I just can't shut up. So probably expect about an hour-long show each and every week. I appreciate you all. Good luck, everyone, and let's go smash this slate. I'll see you all in winning picks at the end of the day. Oh, also stay tuned. The cheat sheet will be updated with Sunday Night Football, Monday Night Football, showdown pricing, as well as the rankings for those will be up later on today as well. See you in chat, everyone.